All right, I think we've got everybody. Good afternoon, everyone, and happy holidays to you. Welcome to today's presentation of a month of service property taxes, protest valuations, exemptions, and payment options. My name is Nia Murray. I am the programs coordinator with Neighborhood Recovery Community Development Corporation, and we are one of the partners in the A Month of Service collaboration. Also included is the City of Houston's Department of Neighborhoods, and joining us today, we have Ms. Myra Hippolyte. Also, our presenting partners with the Harris Central Appraisal District, we have Ms. Mabel Menifee, along with Ms. Clementina Nunez with the Harris County Tax Assessor Collector's Office. But also included in the partnership, we have the Earl Carl Institute, Houston Bar Association, Houston Volunteer Lawyers, and Lone Star Legal Aid. And together, we all make up a month of service. And basically, what a month of service is a collaboration of all 8 of our organizations. We come together on a monthly basis and offer a variety of different workshops, resources, and information to the Houston and surrounding communities relative to empowerment, community empowerment, asset building, asset protection, and the maintaining of generational wealth. We started coming together several years ago in the hopes of creating a larger impact, considering that we do all service the same community and wanting to get as much information as we can out to the communities that we do all serve, that mostly people don't necessarily have access to, don't know about certain resources or services that are available. So we wanted to do our part and again, make sure that we do get that information out to as many community members as we can. Although we used to do these sessions in person, we've had to adjust and adapt to the virtual platform, which in actuality has allowed us the opportunity to reach even more people in surrounding counties throughout the entire state, throughout different parts of the country and in other countries as well, watching us on the virtual platform. So if you are joining us today, via social media or something like that, then we want to welcome you all as well to a month of service. But we want to thank you guys for coming out and continuing to support a month of service and continuing to participate and coming back and letting us know what it is that you'd like to hear, what what more information that you want about. So without the feedback from all of you guys, we won't know what information is actually pertinent to the community. So we appreciate you guys reaching out to us and letting us know. So just so that you guys know, any of our workshops where you see a course number, thanks to the Houston Bar Association, attorneys have the opportunity to take advantage of free CLE classes. So definitely when you self-report, make sure that you use that course number and you'll have the opportunity to take advantage of that. Also know that information that we do provide is for educational purposes only. None of our legal workshops or anything pertaining to the law is to be considered legal advice. However, we do encourage all of you to reach out to our legal service partners or any of our presenters if you have questions about a particular situation for your own personal details. We encourage you to ask whatever questions it is that you like. Again, we want to try to protect your privacy as much as possible. So we ask that you try to keep your questions to be general, not real specific in detail in nature, as we are on a virtual live streaming platform, and the session is also being recorded. We don't want your personal information, your detailed information getting out there for everybody to have access to. So do please keep that in mind. If you are joining us on Facebook, please feel free to type your question into the comment section. And we will read your question at the end of the presentation. Joining us on Zoom, please feel free to type your questions into the comment section. We do have a couple of representatives from the tax office and from the appraisal district that will be monitoring the chat and answering questions there as well. Some of those questions we will go back and answer aloud as well, because not everybody sees the chat or actually pays attention. So some of those questions that are answered there, asked there sometimes, or questions that are real relative to what other people may be thinking or have questions about as well. So I believe that's it. I think that's all of our housekeeping for right now. I think we're going to go ahead and move on into our introductions and our presentation. Again, we want to thank you guys and welcome you all to this A Month of Service presentation. So we're going to get to the introductions. We're going to go with Ms. Myra with the City of Houston's Department of Neighborhoods. Myra.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you doing? How was your Thanksgiving? Mine was fantastic, of course, because I ate a lot. And you know, when I eat, I feel much better. But welcome to the month of service partnership. This partnership is all about giving you back and free information to the Houston community, Harris County, state of Texas community. Guys, on behalf of Mayor Sylvester Turner and Director Takasha Francis, we want to welcome you to this amazing partnership. And this partnership is all about making sure you're educated, that whenever you're going through a stressor, you have all the information you need that is right in front of you. We just had coffee and conversation yesterday, and we discussed transfer on death deed, how to pass on your generational wealth. You have different options. You can have from just as simple as creating your own will, which we have an educational workshop on that, as well as we have as easy as creating your own transfer on death deed and filing it with the county clerk's office for maybe 40, 50 bucks, all the way up to having an estate plan. And we have some great and amazing partners with Lone Star Legal Aid, Houston Volunteer Lawyers, and TSU or Earl Carl Institute. Sorry about that. The first thing you have to do, though, is to be able to go through either those partners or get assistance in getting a transfer on death deed notarized for free. You first have to be pre-assessed through our partnership, and I will attach the link here. And Neil will also share the flyer that you can also document, and she will send the flyer out to the community so that you can also get pre-assessed for a notary, getting your transfer on death deed, starting out through the process of getting your transferred on death deed notarized for free, and all the way to getting a complete estate plan. Thank you, guys. Have a great day. And you know, the next few weeks before the end of the year, we're all very busy. We're trying to make sure that we're passing on as much information as we can to the community. So if you have any questions, any issues, any concerns, I've also added on chat my contact information. My office number is 832-394-0701, as well as my email is on chat. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day and happy holidays, and please stay safe.
Okay. Ms. Clementina, why don't we have you introduce first, and then Ms. Mabel, after you're done with your introduction, you can move on into the presentation.
No problem. Good afternoon. My name is Clementina Nunez. I'm with the Outreach Department at the Office of Ms. Ann Harris Bennett, the Tax Assessor Collector, and for the Voter Registrar.
Okay. Ms. Mabel, you there?
I am, and let me just
your video went off for some reason.
All right, can you guys see me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mabel Menifee. I'm with the Harris Central Appraisal District. And I want to first of all thank you all for joining us this afternoon. This particular workshop we're going to be talking about, we're going to give you some background on property taxes, a little bit about protesting, and then the all-important information about exemptions. I know many of you for some of you, property taxes may be top of mind once again because you just recently received those bills in the mail. And so one of the things that we're going to talk about today is how that process works annually, so that gives you an idea of, there may be some questions you might have today that you probably needed to ask back in the spring so that you would know how to proceed prior to your tax bills being calculated and sent out. But perhaps we can give you some information today that's going to help you next year. As well as answer questions about the process of payments and that sort of thing that Clementina is going to get into later on. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started with the information from the appraisal district. We like to put the appraisal district and the tax assessor collector's office on in a joint presentation because we basically represent two sides of the property tax coin. The appraisal district is responsible for valuations and setting the values and hearing the protest and administering exemptions, whereas tax office is responsible for calculating your bills, collecting them, and then along with any payment, adjusting any payment plans for you. So let's go ahead and get started. And I guess you guys can see that now. Just a little bit about the appraisal district. A little background on what we do. And I am wondering why it won't advance.
Using your arrow key. It just changed.
I guess I think I have to slow down in Wi-Fi for a minute. So one of the reasons we have to do, you have to pay property taxes is because they support in Texas and many other states local services, critical local services, such as your police, your fire department, schools, roads and parks, and other services. Property taxes play a bit of an outsized role here in Texas, along with a few other states, because those are the states where there is no income tax, no state income tax. So as I said, property taxes tend to fill in the void for those local services that we all expect and need. I mentioned there were just some other states. These just kind of take a look at some of the other states that don't offer, that do not have income tax, state income tax, and that includes Florida, as you can see here, Texas, of course, Washington State, Nevada. A lot of people get confused about property taxes in terms of, okay, which one is that? I pay different taxes, and of course, you know that you pay your federal income taxes, which is based on those taxes are based on how much you earn. The states function typically by sales tax, and some of that comes back locally, but states operate primarily on sales tax and other specific kinds of taxes from businesses and such. And then, of course, the local tax, if you're a property owner, is also known, you may hear it referred to as an ad valorem, or according to value tax, and it's based on, unlike federal income tax, which is based on how much you earn, it's based on the value of the property that you own. So one of the things it's important, we'd like for folks to know from HCAD, and as well as what dictates what many of the taxing jurisdictions have to do, is that property tax laws originate with your state legislature. They are part of we operate on the Texas Property Tax Code and laws as well, and it is part of the state constitution. So central appraisal districts, Harris County, or Harris Central as we are now, Harris Central appraisal districts we are responsible, as I mentioned earlier, for appraising all county land, including residential, commercial, industrial, agricultural, and then something called business personal property, which isn't land, but it's basically the property, equipment, and such that's used by businesses when in the course of their business, in the course of running their business. We are required and expected to provide a market value as close to 100% of the market value as possible. And the value is based on January 1st of each year. That basically means that the condition of your property, whatever it is on January the 1st, is what your tax for that year is going to be based on. There could be a fire or something else that might happen on January the 5th or January the 6th. But whatever that property value was on January the 1st, that is what your taxes will be based on come the end of the year. Now, if come the end of the year, that next January the 1st comes around and you have not been able to repair or put things back in order, that's when you would see a reduction in its value. The other two things that we do, two very important things, is that we manage exemptions and maintain those records. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. And then we do something called certification, or we certify the appraisal rolls. And what that does is it says to all of the taxing jurisdictions, and by taxing jurisdictions, I of course mean the city, the county, the school district, wherever you receive a tax bill from, that it allows them, we tell them this is the value of the property in the county, and that allows them to know what revenue they can expect, tax revenue they can expect, and then it allows them to set their tax rates and calculate the bills that are later sent out. I mentioned January the 1st as an important date, just kind of to let you know why the appraisal district as well as the tax office kind of has certain deadlines and must meet certain deadlines, is January the 1st being the date of appraisal. March through May, just something we wanted everyone here to know that we conduct, in addition to this particular workshop and several others, in around March are going to morph into what we like to call our protest workshops. So we begin in March conducting workshops on protesting your value. So if you receive that annual value notice and you are not happy or you disagree with the value, then you have the opportunity to file a protest. What we do in March through May is kind of help people understand what that process is and sort of help you decide if that's what you want to do. And then as well as some tips on how to do it, what's expected, and that sort of thing. May 15th is going to be the protest deadline for people who receive those annual value notices. And then that continues. And then, of course, right now, the season that we're in is the tax assessor collector season, which the bills were mailed in, well, not exactly in October this year. Some were, others probably November and December. And then, of course, all taxes are due by February the 1st. They are delinquent after February the 1st. So mention one of the things you're going to get, the thing that you get from HCAT that kicks a lot of this activity off is the annual value notice. That's the value notice that we send out to folks usually beginning in mid-March, late March, that you get, excuse me, that is based on that January the 1st value, and that we have a value that we have determined your property is worth. The market value is what we determine each year. The appraised value, when you see that letter, you'll have those two figures down there towards the middle of the page. The market value, you'll see that's in bold, and the appraised value. The market value is what HCAT determines annually. The appraised value, while it can be the same as the market value, it's going to probably be lower if you've got a homestead exemption. And that's because there's that 10% appraisal increase cap that you're protected with from more than, the value can never go up in a single year more than 10%. And because of the other exemptions that may be applied to that. It's important to remember that the appraised value is what your taxes are configured on, not the market value. This is just a closer look at that annual value notice, what it looks like, and because I wanted to bring it to your attention in terms of what we call that I-file number at the top. That's the number that you are going to use whenever you want to contact HCAT about your specific account, and particularly in protesting your appraisal. So there are ways. I mentioned that you have a right to protest, and you will have different ways. You're going to get a paper form that's going to be included with that annual value notice, and then you can decide to use that and you send that in, or you can do it electronically through something called iFile or iSettle. You also have the opportunity to meet with an appraiser. You can do these meetings virtually or in person. You can come out to HCAT if you like, or you can meet, or you can have it as set up virtually. And we call that an informal hearing. And that's where you would meet with an appraiser and and speak with them about what you think the value should be, and by all means, bring that along the proof that you have that your value should be lower. Some cases higher, but most often lower. And that's called the informal meeting. If you and the appraiser can't reach an agreement, or you're not satisfied with what they offered, what he or she offered, you can then go on to something called a formal hearing, and that's the hearing with the appraisal review board panel. That as well can be virtual or in person, but that is the formal hearing. That's the one that that ultimately determines what the value is going to be throughout the process that you have as your individual right. And these are usually 3-person or 1-person panels. And once that was final, if you're not happy with that outcome, you can also, there are other methods that include things like arbitration and other legal ways of disputing what your tax value has been set at. These are always problem with the issue with these is that that's when it requires additional money from you. You have to put out more additional money to move that process beyond the appraisal review board process. So HCAD's role, we talked about, we set the market value. So we do that annually. We review the home values in the area annually, and we set those values based on the sales in your area. Sales, and as you know, sales have been upticking, although it appears that they're starting to stabilize at this point because of interest rates and other issues. But always remember that the sales prices within your community can go up or down, and that's due to the various market forces, which I just mentioned a couple of. The appraised value, and that is what we also provide you, is the once you have your exemptions in place, the appraised value is that value that I told you would be typically lower if you've got some exemptions in place. And that's going to be what your tax rate is configured on. That's times the exemptions appraised value minus the exemptions that you have in place times whatever the tax rate for that jurisdiction is going to equal your tax bill from that particular jurisdiction. It's also important just to remember that tax rates are set by the jurisdictions and or the taxing authorities, which I mentioned before, are going to be your school district. Your school board usually sets that. Your county commissioner's court sets what it's going to be for the county, and typically city council will do the same for the city of Houston. So I wanted to show you this in terms of just to kind of keep in mind what for further down the road, particularly if you're interested in the protest process next year. So what HCAD does is there are about 7,000 neighborhoods that are grouped according to characteristics. And so it's always your market value is going to be based on the type of neighborhood characteristics that you have, and as well as the condition of the property. And then it involves the recent whether it's a recent purchase. In other words, if you just bought the home, then whatever you paid for it, you establish the market value right then and there for that particular home. And if you haven't, then the comparable sales in your area, those that are sales that are made on homes that are very similar to yours, are going to be used in terms of calculating the market value for that home. And then, of course, there are the amenities. You've got a swimming pool or tennis court in the backyard, of course, it's going to be worth a little more than the neighbor who doesn't. But if you are considering protesting, we want you to know that you're going to be the expert on what's going on in your home, what the condition of the property is, and all of this information, which we may or may not have for your particular property. So if you're interested in protesting, we want you to maybe bookmark this information, because no one knows your home like you do. and therefore you can bring the most pertinent information to HCAD about it. So let's talk now about exemptions and how important they are, as I've kind of mentioned throughout the presentation, in saving you money. How do you get them? What qualifies you for them? And when are they no longer valid? So the exemptions are basically a discount on your property taxes. It excludes part of your property from taxation, and because it reduces that appraised value before your tax rates are calculated and applied. Some of those are state mandated. For instance, the ones that are related to school districts. There's a minimum amount that the state requires school districts to give those with exemption. Others can be offered by individual taxing jurisdictions, such as the city of Houston or Harris County, or maybe or perhaps a community college or one of the other taxing entities. Now, it's important to remember too that whenever there's a change of ownership, whatever those exemptions were that were with that property, that they were there because the owner qualified for them, not because of anything to do with the property. So exemptions are based on the qualifications of the owner and not the property. And that's very important in terms of making sure that appropriate titles are cleared and that sort of thing. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And these are some of the major, the most prominent exemptions that you can have. If you own and occupy a home, then surely you've got your general resident homestead exemption. You have, in addition to that, once you turn 65, for the entire year that you turn 65, you qualify for an additional set of exemptions called the over age 65 exemptions. Included in that are the over age 55 surviving spouse exemptions. There are disability exemptions, which are much like the over 65. There are various exemptions, I should say, for disabled veterans. There are some also set aside for the survivor of a first responder that's killed in the line of duty. And then there's some other service-related exemptions as well. One of the things that many of you have probably experienced a little bit of surprise and enjoyment, I guess, is probably, I won't say joy, but the fact that many of you saw some of your taxes go down in the bills that you received in recent weeks because of a constitutional amendment that was approved by voters on November the 7th. That, remember I talked about those state mandated exemptions? Well, this one was one that increased the general resident homestead exemption from $40,000 to $100,000 for school taxes. So instead of $40,000 being subtracted from your value before your tax rates were applied this year, $100,000 was for school taxes. And then another one that was important to a lot of people was that the vote on November 7th also provided a 20% valuation cap on property that is non-homesteaded, that is valued at least $5 million or less. It can be more than that. And that's usually, we're talking about rental property there. The hope on this one is that that savings will eventually be passed on to renters, people who are renting property as well. Most common exemptions, I mentioned that we talked about the general resident homestead exemption. What is that? That you now have that $100,000 school tax exemption on. You have to own and occupy that home as your primary residence, and you're only allowed one of those. With HCAD, we maintain those, and you would provide proof of ownership, of course, as well as a driver's license when you make the application for that homestead exemption. The driver's license that you would send that in, as well as the proof of ownership, and in other words, the deed needs to be in your name. And the driver's license, the address on the driver's license must match the address of the property for which you're applying for the exemption. Now, one of the other things, in addition to that school tax exemption of $100,000, another thing that, and those other exemptions that might come that might come with the homestead exemption, depending on where you live, is something called a appraisal increase cap. So if you're living in an area where property values have been just going up and up and up in recent years, sometimes as much as 15, 20, 25, even 30% or more, the general resident homestead exemption provides you with a 10% cap. So in other words, no matter how much values may be going up or have gone up in your area, you're protected with, they can never go up more than 10% a year, because you have that general resident homestead exemption. Other exemptions, as I mentioned before, may be offered by, depending on where you live, by the various jurisdictions. The over 65 and disability exemptions are pretty much the same. You can only have one or the other. If you turn over 65, you qualify for that exemption for that entire year. Even if you turn over 65 on December 30th, you want to wait till this month to apply. You would have waited until mid-December at least to apply, but you're going to get it for all of 2023 once it is applied to your account. The disability exemption that I mentioned, which is similar to that, but you will qualify for that if you're on Social Security, or if a physician statement can provide proof that you're disabled and no longer to work, you can qualify for it that way as well. So some of the benefits of having this over 65 or disability exemption is that the year that you turn 65, whatever you paid in school taxes that year, it's going to be frozen at that amount. They call that a tax ceiling or freeze or tax limitation. You may hear different terms. So it basically means that your school taxes will never go up more than what you paid that year. Now they can go down if the value of the property falls, but they can never go up unless you do something like add major value to the home, such as you add square footage, add an extra room or two. Maybe you decide you want that tennis court or swimming pool in the back. That's going to add value to your home. And so your ceiling will probably be reset, including that additional value. It also is the school tax ceiling is portable to, if you were to decide to move somewhere else, the value would be adjusted, but you can't take it with you. Exemptions can be granted, all of the exemptions that you get with the general resident homestead, and you're also eligible, once you have that over 65 or disability, you're eligible for something called a tax deferral, or you can pay taxes this time of year. It becomes especially important. You can pay taxes in installments without penalties. And Clementine is going to talk about that a little bit more. And then there may be other special over 65 exemptions that are granted by various jurisdictions. Harris County and the city of Houston, for instance, will increase that exemption amount for you by quite a bit when you turn over 65. I want to also mention something called the heirship exemption. And this is important when property is owned by, usually more than one sibling, or by multiple heirs, as it says here. So basically that means that there may be someone living in the home who has lived there. Maybe they live there with the parents, maybe they took care of them, or maybe they're the only one of the heirs occupying the home. The other heirs have homes elsewhere, perhaps, and have their own exemptions, general resident or whatever. And this person who's living in this home, taking care of it and doing all the maintaining it, up until a few years ago, they weren't necessarily entitled to the full exemption because they were not the full owners. If there were 4 siblings, one living there, they may have only been entitled to 25% of the exemption because they represented 1/4 of the ownership. There is a method by which folks in that condition, in that situation, can apply for the full exemption, even though they are one of several heirs. They can apply for the full exemption, and once they receive it, it does not affect the ownership rights of any of the heirs to the property. It just gives that individual who is living there, taking care of it, gives them the opportunity to take advantage of the full homestead exemption, and in so doing, better able to maintain the property as well. And some of the things that the key things we're going to need, this is going to be on section 3. I want to, for anyone who's interested or know of someone, I'll call their attention to section 3 of our homestead exemption application, where it will ask you the question of whether or not there are any, is this an heir property? And if you check yes, then it sort of initiates a series of steps and a set of instructions for you on how you can work towards getting that heirship exemption as well. An affidavit establishing ownership, as you can kind of see here, some of the things they're going to need. A copy of the death certificate for the prior owner, a copy of the most recent utility bill. You may ask why, and that's so that we can make sure that establish that the home is actually being lived in. And then citation of any court records or whatever. The important thing to remember here is that if you have any questions, feel free to call HCAD and ask for someone, speak with someone in our exemptions department, and they'll be more than happy to kind of help walk you through this with the things that you need to provide. The immediate resident homestead exemption. This is something that's relatively new, and it provides, it used to be, remember I mentioned January the 1st is kind of a key date for everything. Well, it used to be that you could only get your exemption after you lived in the house beyond the January the 1st. Now you can, if you buy the home in say March, then you can get an immediate homestead exemption from March through December of that year, meaning that it's going to be prorated. You won't get it for the full year, but it will be prorated. However, you have to apply for it before the first anniversary of the date in which you moved into the property. And also remember that if the home was previously owned and receiving exemptions, the previous owner's exemptions will likely remain on there for the remainder of that tax year. So you may not be able to get your exemption immediately, but you're going to benefit from the exemptions that were already there from the previous owner. So it's important to remember that. It's also important to kind of think of this really benefits a lot of folks that are moving into new construction or homes that were previously rental homes. So again, the first year is going to be a prorated exemption, and then that following full year is when your eligibility cap, that 10% cap, will be set for the following year. So how do you apply for these exemptions that we've been talking about? You can do it by mail. You can email us. We have an app, a mobile app for those of you that prefer to do it that way, or you can also do it online. We have a fillable form that you can use online and just download that, submit that. You can also make a copy of your driver's license. Remember, we have to have a copy of the driver's license when you're applying for an exemption, and it must match that of the property. So if you're moving into a new home, one of the first things you want to do, try to remember to get that driver's license changed. And if you are already living in the home and something I've said here today kind of makes you scratch your head and wonder if everything is in place, you can verify those exemptions that you have by looking at the back of the annual value notice. They're usually listed there. They're also listed on our website as well as the tax office's website. So no need to scratch your head for long after this presentation, you can go right out there and check. So once again, the qualifications for those exemptions: you have to own and occupy the home as your primary residence, and be sure to submit a copy of that driver's license. And also, please remember, exemptions are not granted automatically. We may, in some cases, have a person's age, but there were so many different forms that people filled out in previous years that we may not have the information on your birthday. So we have no idea that you turned 65. So please go ahead and apply, double check, make sure that you have those exemptions. So go ahead and apply anyway. It would be my suggestion. Just make sure of that. This is a copy of our what our website landing homepage looks like, the Harris Central Appraisal District. And if you look at this bar just right below the dark blue bar at the top, where you can go out on a property search, that's where you would go to look up your property. You type in the address or the account number and pull up your property, and you can double check whether or not you have exemptions by looking at the property. It's going to say residential homestead under the exemptions column if you have the general resident homestead exemption. If you are checking for whether or not you have that over 65 or the disability exemption, it's not going to say that exactly. It's going to say, in addition to residential homestead, it's going to say multiple. And the reason it says multiple is because by state law, we're not allowed to provide that type of personal information on a public website about an individual resident. So we don't want to say that the resident is disabled or that they're over 65. So it's going to say multiple. You'll know what it means. And I also wanted to, just before I leave and turn this over to the tax office, I want to also mention, we talked a little bit about the appraisal review board. Just note that if anyone out there is interested, maybe perhaps they're retired, maybe they're just not working or working at different hours, that applications are currently being continuing to be accepted for the 2024 appraisal review board. And these are basically citizens of Harris County who apply for and get appointed to the appraisal review board. So you can find that information out on our HCAD website. It does require full-time commitment between basically mid-May through October as that protest and hearing season takes place. And if you're interested or you think you might be interested, please go to our website. There are applications as well as what the membership qualifications are at www.hcad.org. And that is where you can contact us. We're also located at 13013 Northwest Freeway, right at the Hollister-Tidwell exit. Our website, as I mentioned earlier, is www.hcad.org. Our phone number is 713-957-7800. Our email is help@hcad.org. I have with me listening in the chat room today my colleague Alicia Kellum, who also is part of the e-bank, or when you send in those questions at help@hcad.org, she may be likely one of the folks answering them. And so if you have any questions, please, she'll be answering those in the chat today. And with that, I thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this. Again, I encourage you to join us again. We have these monthly. However, if you're interested in that meaty protest piece, where we're actually going to have with us as part of the presentation and actually giving the presentation, we're going to have an appraiser, a senior appraiser from HCAD, as well as a valuation analyst that will help carry those out. So stay tuned for the March, April, and May ones if you're interested in that. And again, thank you so much. And now I would like to turn it over to the tax office. We're going to flip the coin and talk about the payments and processing part. Thank you very much. And now here's Clementina.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mabel. Ms. Clementina?
Let me go ahead and share my screen. Does everyone see my screen?
Yep,
Oh.
you're good.
Oh, wait, hold on. Nope. Can you see it now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
just making sure. All right, so we're going to go over how property taxes are, the basics of how they're calculated as it relates to the tax office. I'll discuss payment plan options and how you can pay for your taxes. So first off, a little bit of property tax overview. The property tax division maintains approximately 1.7 million tax accounts and collects more than 8 billion in property taxes. Now, although there are over 500 taxing units across Harris County, our office actually only collects and disperses to 81 of those taxing jurisdictions, which are the larger taxing jurisdictions, which includes, of course, Harris County, City of Houston, Houston ISD, the Flood Control District, just to name some, as well as some of the smaller cities within Harris County and a few of the other school districts, but not all of them. When it comes to calculating your tax bill, we're actually going to receive information from other offices. The first part is going to be coming from the appraisal district, which is going to be the taxable value. The taxable value is going to be composed of your appraised value minus any exemptions that are on that property account. Once the protesting season has been finalized and they have come to determine the final appraised value, then we're able to get that taxable value. Then the next component that we're waiting for is going to be the tax rate, which is set by the taxing jurisdiction, which is typically around August through October, where they're finalizing and adopting their tax rate for the year. Once we get that information, then we're able to do our job, which is to calculate your tax bill and then mail it out to the property owners. Of course, you can always view your tax statement online on our website by either searching for your name, your address, or your account number. And you can go up to the past 5 years as well. When it comes to understanding that tax bill, especially if you receive more than one tax bill, one way you can definitely see that you're receiving a tax bill from the Harris County Tax Office is that on the left-hand side, you will see Ms. Ann Harris Bennett or whoever the tax assessor is, the county logo, and of course your account number on the right-hand side. And then for what taxing jurisdictions we're collecting for, which is pretty much in the middle of your tax bill. Of course, any applied exemptions that are on the account, their taxable value, their tax rates, and then finally, how much is it going to cost you? Now, if you are wondering, you applied for an exemption and you're wondering, did it get added to my account? You can actually see that on your tax bill. On the right-hand side, there is a section that says exemptions and deferrals. So as Ms. Mabel mentioned, if you have more than one exemption on your account, it will say residence and in parentheses, multiple. Then at the very bottom of that tax bill is what we call a coupon. The only time you detach this coupon is if you are deciding to mail us a check as your payment, and that's the only time. Other than that, if you're paying by in person with cash, then you don't need to tear off this coupon. But this coupon allows us to accredit your check to the correct account in case you have more than one property, that you own more than one property, you're able to get that account accredited to the correct check. Recent changes that have occurred that may affect your property tax bill. For this year, Harris County, the Commissioner's Court, they ruled to increase the over 65 and disabled exemption value from 250,000 to 275,000, as well as the general homestead exemption got increased, which was for your school taxes, went up from 40,000 to 100,000. And then last year, the city of Houston, they decided as well to increase their exemption value for the over 65 and disabled exemption from 160,000 to 260,000. And of course, the homestead exemption, property owners became eligible to have it prorated from the date of the purchase instead of January 1st of the following year, as Ms. Mabel had explained in her presentation. Speaking still of recent changes, recently in last month on November 7th, voters approved Proposition 4, which impacted people's tax bills. One was their school taxes. The increase of school homestead exemption increased from the 40,000 to the 100,000, as well as there was a limit of the appraisal increase on certain properties, which was for those non-homestead properties, which was at the 20%. Now, how is this going to be sustainable for the years to come is by through requiring restructuring of the school finance system through the tax rate compression, recapturing of those payments, and reducing those local revenues. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at how the homestead exemption can save a property owner some money. So in this scenario, we'll take a look at a home that's valued $325,000, and there's three scenarios. The first one is if the property owner has no homestead exemption. At that point, that property owner is looking at a tax bill that's a little bit over $7,100. That's without any exemption. Now, if this property owner had a homestead exemption, then they would be seeing some savings, which cuts down their property tax bill. They would be seeing a savings about a little bit over $1,800, especially if they have a home that's priced at $325,000. Now, if this property owner will also, in addition to their homestead exemption, had an over 65 or a disabled exemption, then they definitely drastically see a reduction in their tax bill. As you can see, it pretty much cuts it down to like almost 1/3 of what their original bill would have been if there's no exemptions on that account. Please note that each taxing jurisdiction does have the liberty to assign what their exemption value amounts are going to be. With Harris County, it allows a 20% for homestead exemption. And then, of course, if you have it over 65 or disabled exemption, that is for the 275,000 value in the exemption. So now let's go ahead and talk about some of the benefits of having either an over 65 or a disabled exemption as it relates to your property taxes. So the first one we're going to talk about is the tax limitation, also known as tax ceiling or tax freeze. If you ever hear any of these terms interchangeably, just know that they refer to your school taxes being frozen. It limits the increase of the taxes for school and some taxing jurisdictions, just not all the property taxes. So as Ms. Mabel had mentioned in her presentation, the only way to break these tax ceiling is if you decide to add square footage, increasing the value of your property. But other than that, if you're not doing any of those renovations that are adding square footage, then your school taxes get frozen at the amount that you were paying whenever those exemptions got applied, which is pretty good for people that are on a fixed income and they at least know, okay, this is how much my school taxes are going to be moving forward. It could decrease, which a lot of people have seen a decrease this year in their tax bill for their school taxes, but it won't increase as long as you don't break that tax ceiling. And then, of course, it applies to homes that have the homestead exemption in addition to over 65 or disabled. Another benefit of having the over 65 or disabled exemption is going to be a tax deferral. Now, you can qualify for a tax deferral. The idea behind the tax deferral was if you were on a fixed income and you were having some type of financial hardship for that particular year, you could apply for a tax deferral to help you out temporarily. It was there kind of like an insurance policy there if you need it, but if you don't, it didn't really hurt. But with the tax deferral, the benefit is that it helps to postpone tax payments and prevent foreclosure. Now, please know that there is a 5% interest per year on unpaid balances. Regular delinquency is 7% automatically the first month, which increases by 2% each month that delinquency of the unpaid balance continues. But with a tax deferral, it's a flat 5% interest for the entire year that balance is there. The deferral ends upon the sale or the change in the property ownership, meaning if you decide to no longer make that house your primary residence, you sell it, or you give it to someone else, so a transfer of ownership, that's when the tax deferral ends. And then at that point, all postponed tax payments are due within 180 days without accruing any penalty and interest. Come 181 days, that's when the penalty and interest do accrue. Now, if you decide to go down the tax deferral route, you want to consult with your mortgage company if you still are paying your mortgage. Some mortgage companies don't recognize a tax deferral because they feel like it would be infringing on their lien rights, as well as talk with your heirs. If you are going to pass down your property to someone else and you're using the route of having a tax deferral to kind of help you through those times where income is a little bit more tight, then you want to let them know that there has been postponed tax payments, so that way they're not fully surprised of a tax bill that is so many amount. That way they're aware of it. Now, in order to apply for a tax deferral, you would complete the deferral affidavit through HCAD. You would file it with them, and then we would get the information once it's been added to their system, so that way we can do our calculations on our end. But the qualifications in order to get a tax deferral is that one, it's your homestead residence. Two, the property owner is either age 65 or older, a disabled homeowner, or a disabled veteran. Now, we're going to talk about payment plan options. So if you ever need more time to pay, we do have flexible payment plan options. The payment contract can be anywhere between 12 to 36 months. Just be mindful that if you're going to extend it past 12 months, you're running into another tax bill year. So just keep that in mind. But it can be used as a financial planning tool. Of course, you can always pay it off early. It helps to avoid collection efforts, foreclosure actions. Now you can start requesting for a payment plan as early as February 1st. January 31st has to pass and we enter into delinquency period in order for you to request for a payment plan. This also helps to be, if you're on a payment plan, it helps to avoid those attorney fees as long as the contract begins before law firm starts collection. So within delinquency period, it starts on February 1st and it goes all the way through the end of June without being sent over to collections. Any account that is not on a payment plan by July 1st gets sent to collections on July 1st. And that's anywhere between 15 to 20% that the law firm will tack on to what's already been accruing during its time of being unpaid balance. So just keep that in mind. Some of the payment plan options that our customers have available to them that they can choose from depending on their exemption status or property type are as follow. So the first one that I'll talk about is the quarterly payment plan. This one is going to apply for property owners that have one, a homestead residence. In addition to that, they have an over 65 exemption or disabled exemption, or their surviving spouse, or they're a disabled veteran. This payment plan divides their payments into 4 equal payments that are due at the end of January, March, May, and July. The interest, there are none, as long as you pay in a timely manner, and it applies to all unpaid taxes. But if you feel that 4 equal payments is still a little bit too much for you, and or either you don't have an over 65 or disabled exemption, and that doesn't apply to you, but you just have a homestead residence, then you can apply or go under the homestead plan. Now, the homestead plan is going to apply to all homestead residents. The contract is from 12 to 36 months. The terms is a 1% interest per month plus that initial penalty month, which, as we know, the initial penalty month is going to be 7%. And the tax type applies for current and prior tax years, and they're due at the end of each month. Now, if you have other property, so if your main property is okay, but you have a secondary property, such as a non-residence, business, commercial, or personal property that is going to be delinquent in their taxes, just remember that the contract for those can be anywhere between 12 to 36 months. The terms is accrue penalty and interest. and they're due at the end of each month as well. And this being on a payment plan, the ultimate goal is to avoid being on those attorney fees as long as the contract begins before the law firm starts collection. Now, in order to avoid being on a payment plan, if you're like, whew, let me not want to go down the delinquency route, let me start ahead of time, then we do have prepayment plans. I like to think of this as setting up an escrow account with the tax office. We do accept advance payment for this year's property taxes. You would just call us to set that account with us as long as you don't already have an escrow account with your mortgage lender. So this is more on the line for people that already have paid off their property, but they need additional help to just kind of start putting money to the side so that way they don't run into these situations where they can't pay their taxes all at once they receive it. So you can pay any amount at any time for an unbilled tax year. So you call us and you set that up, the escrow account with our office, and then you would mail us a check, and then indicate your account number as well as your tax year on your payment. On those payments, you want to include your property address or your account number on the payment. Now, the type of payment options that our customers can pay with is either they can pay online on our website at www.hctax.net, or they can pay by mail. But please be mindful that we do go by the postmark due date. So if it was due on the end of the month and it gets postmarked the following day, we're going to go with that postmark date. You can either pay by telephone at 713-274-2273, or you can come into any of our 16 branch locations and pay your property taxes. Payment types that we accept is that no additional charge to you is you can either pay by check, or if you're paying online, e-check. If you are coming in person to one of our locations, you can only pay in cash or by any of these other methods. Now, if you're going to be paying with a credit card or a debit card, just be mindful that there is going to be an extra charge on top of what your balance is, which is at 2.45%. It doesn't get deducted from your balance. It's in addition to what you're paying because that is what the credit card companies are going to charge, the convenience fee. And you can make full or partial payments on current and or prior tax years, just not by telephone. Now, important dates that you should know. January 31st every year is the last day to pay without penalty and interest. And come the following day, February 1st, is the beginning date that you can start requesting for a payment plan. If you're not on a payment plan by the end of June, I like to say, come July 1st, collections and those attorney fees are added to the unpaid taxes. Then in the late summer, August through October, is when the local jurisdictions are adopting their tax rates. And once they have been certified and everything is done, then we can do our calculations. And that's when the tax bills are being mailed out to the property owners. And you can view it as well on our website. And then on the final day of the year, December 31st, is the last day to pay to use as a deduction for the same year's federal income tax. As always, our office is here to help you. Now, if you have any specific questions in regards to your property, you can always give us a call at 713-274-8000. Or if you would specifically like to send us an email, you can email us at tax.office@hctx.net, as well as you can view any of this information on our website, which is listed there. This concludes my presentation. If there's any questions in regards to what has been discussed or how to set up a payment plan, we can definitely discuss that. I also have a colleague of mine, Ms. Vicky, that is going to be assisting me in answering any questions that you may have in the chat. Thank you.
All right. I think this is the first time we have never had a lot of questions in the chat box.
I think it's because it's December.
Probably so. You could very well be correct there. I just want to double check, go back and And yeah, we didn't have any questions in the chat this time. Can you believe that, Miss Mabel?
No, I can't, but I can, based on what what Clementina just said, it is December. I would expect Clementina to have a few questions about payment plans, but I think she so thoroughly explained it that
Wasn't
there's
necessary.
yes.
Okay. All right. Well, at this
Then
time, and I don't see anything
then we
even
haven't
in
put
the,
we haven't put Alicia to work either.
yeah, I'm looking at Facebook as well. There are no questions in the chat on Facebook, comments in the sections on Facebook either. Wow.
So it's a
Interesting.
busy time for those guys down there, and I know for our folks too, that when the tax bills go out, HCAT starts getting almost, not quite as many, but almost as many questions as the tax office in terms of things. So, um, so yeah, I guess these guys can go back to work.
And you know what, Mabel, I think there's gonna be a lot of questions eventually now that they're getting their tax bills, but also when the new changes come into effect. And that's one question that I was asked, do the new law comes into effect now in 2023, or does it start in 2024?
And it applies for this year, 2023.
So get ready for the phone calls, because I know a lot of people, we were expecting our tax bill to be much higher, and then it was cut practically in half, which we were very grateful. And
Yes,
my
indeed.
husband was asking me questions. Well, why did this happen? Why did that happen? And I was trying to explain. So the new law does come into effect to this. So that's why most of everyone's tax bill was cut, or anyone that was homestead, correct?
Yes.
And that's the
Anyone
exciting
the
part.
primary residents, and then you also have to think about any other resident that had a non-homestead also got the benefit of the 20% as well.
Wow, that is
So,
amazing.
so if someone hasn't homesteaded yet, how does it go back, or does it go back and discount the bill for this year if they homestead now and they didn't before? Will they get the benefit of the $100,000 increase, or the $60,000 increase from the 40,000 for the school tax?
From my understanding, as long as they have that exemption on their account for the homestead, then yes, it would apply the 100,000. Now, if they did not have it, then they falls under the non-homestead properties, which is that 20% appraisal cap.
So let me ask you something. If they decided, oh man, I should have homesteaded last year, let's just say in January 2024, they come in and say, oh wow, wait a minute, I forgot to homestead. Would they be able to go back and homestead for 2023 or no?
I believe there's a retroactive period where it will go back a certain number of years in order to get the refund. But I believe Ms. Vicky could answer that question even
She
better
said,
since she always is looking at
she
those
says,
accounts.
Miss Alicia says yes, but it depends. And it says we are behind in exemption application process. If HCAT website shows exemption action pending, then your application is still waiting to be processed. If it doesn't, then you want to reach out for help. But she says yes, it depends. If they were new owners in 2023, they will have 1 year to apply.
Okay. All right. So if I bought a house in 2023, I will have 1 year to apply for homestead exemption. And so I can go back.
To get the prorated exemption.
Okay, prorated.
Or the new prorated exemption, yes, you have 1 year.
Okay, fantastic. And that's going to be interesting, because a lot of people, when they're doing that monthly mortgage, a lot of what are they called? The mortgages, they pay the taxes and all the escrow. Thank you so much. They pay, the escrow pays the tax bill sometimes in July. So now that this process has come in, a lot of people are probably going to get, since they've already paid the taxes, they might get some money put back in their escrow, correct?
Yes.
No, In July?
Yep, a refund, Ms. Vicky says.
Refund, right? Because,
What
oh yeah,
tax
a
bills come out
lot
in
of mortgages go ahead and pay it in July before December. So,
How can they do and they don't have a tax bill yet?
Yeah, in July. Yeah, you said July. So how do you get a tax bill in July?
well, when
But-
did they get the tax bill? Okay, because I know somebody has been paying it ahead or maybe
They
behind.
do as long as they like typically
November.
for my in November, if the tax
That's
bill
it.
comes
Sorry
out
about that,
October,
November.
if it comes out October, November, my mortgage company will go ahead and just pay the bill regardless if it's not due until January the 30th,
That's it.
anyway, they'll still go ahead and pay it.
And
But
then if
Miss,
there are changes, now they'll add that money into their escrow. And what we suggest is don't take that money from your escrow and go spend it, because you never know what your next year's taxes or the following years are going to be. So keep that money if you're allowed to. I'm not sure if you're allowed to, but if you're allowed to, keep that money in that escrow, because you never know when your taxes may go up or down or whatever, but at least you have that extra money in your escrow. Nia, can you keep that money in the escrow since you know all about real estate?
it depends on the loan servicing company. Sometimes they will allow you to keep it, and sometimes they'll just send you the refund because they only want the maximum or what they're allowed to have in overage. So they want that cushion to be
Okay.
there. If it's too much of a cushion, then they'll automatically just send you the refund back. Ms. Alicia says if an exemption is added after the taxes were paid, then refunds will be due to the taxpayer of the taxes once the exemption is processed and fully in both offices.
Okay.
And yes, you can pay ahead before the due date, but do you have to request the refund or is it automatically sent?
So I think
So
it's
if my mortgage company received my tax bill already, but for some reason the exemption wasn't applied, and now I see I'm due for a refund, automatic refunds due to HCAT's corrections.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Either keep it on your escrow, and if you're not allowed to keep it in your escrow, and you get it at home, put it on a savings, because you never know. And this is just my suggestion, is just information, and not legal advice, as we always say. Put it in your savings account, because I promise you, your taxes will go up.
If not your taxes, then your homeowner's insurance, that's for sure. Because we know those rates went up tremendously as well. My goodness. Oh, but that's a whole, I don't.
Yeah, don't start with me on my
homeowner's
home
insurance.
insurance, because
Let me take
I
it
now
down.
live in the coast, and I live nowhere close to water. So
Yeah.
so don't start me with that.
Yeah, Ms. Vicky says most mortgage companies will run an analysis yearly for new tax year. So yes, you do want to make sure you have that cushion, because when they do run that analysis, when your taxes go up, they're going to increase your mortgage. So if you already have that cushion in your escrow, then your mortgage payment won't go up. So
and that is so important, because I have seen so many young new homeowners think, oh my God, I got this check back, this gigantic check back from my escrow. And they don't realize that, well, you know what? Your taxes, your mortgage is going to go on up every year. So you need to have that cushion, so you will not get
that's something that a lot that's something that a lot of homeowners don't account for when they get new homes built in new constructions built in those areas that are unimproved yet, where they're in a new subdivision. And then all of a sudden all these other houses are going up around you, and they're much more expensive than yours than the following year or two. Yeah, your taxes are can potentially go up if you moved out in one of those underdeveloped communities that's a brand new subdivision. So
and your mortgage, that means your mortgage will go up. And do not have a heart attack. Be prepared, be ready for the next year, because they are actually, when you're doing your closing, your taxes, they're looking at undeveloped property. So expect the second year, your taxes and your mortgage to go up. Sadly, a lot of our new homeowners are not understanding that process. And, some of them are barely sliding in already into a home. And when their mortgage goes up, they have a stroke. They are surprised, and a lot of them say, I can't afford this, so they move or sell it or foreclose. So be prepared for those changes. Do not come in and buy a home and think, oh, well, these are my taxes. If you know, they'll tell you these are 30%, 3%, 3.5, add it to your escrow and leave it in there. Send you a check, and the escrow sends you a check. Put in your savings, because I assure you, you're going to have to pay it next year. It's going to come right back. They're going to take it from you.
Or if not that, then put a small portion, add an additional amount into your escrow every month just to kind of cover that distance. If you know that there's going to be an increase, put an extra $50 in the escrow or something just to be on the safe side, to make sure you have a bigger cushion. So
yeah, so they won't come up, because I assure you, your mortgage will go up every year because of your taxes. And not only your taxes, your insurance. So be prepared, be energized, don't be surprised for what happens. And we're very grateful for the Texas Senate and the Texas House for assisting us with our taxes. We just need a little push more on controlling the yearly appraisal of our home. If you could help us on that also, I know that 10% is pretty good, but if you control the my appraisal, will be great. Myra would be very grateful. I mean, I'm just talking.
Ms. Vicky says, yes, if your escrow is short by the end of the year, the mortgage company will bill you for the following year, which would increase your mortgage payment. So yes.
And that's scary.
Definitely don't want that.
We have a lot of neighbors that come to our house screaming and talking. Or then I get a lot of phone calls from our dear friends that are always having a little hissy because they didn't understand the process. So we're trying to make sure you understand the process.
All right. Well, speaking of our neighbors, we know it's the holiday season, so we're asking everybody to make sure that you check on your neighbors, those loved ones and relatives that you haven't seen in a while. There are a lot of people that are still, or especially during the holiday, do experience the blues and dealing with depression and loss of loved ones during this time of the year. So reach out if you haven't seen that neighbor that's typically outside all the time or whatever, and just say hey and how you doing or something like that, and just kind of be mindful of that. So so definitely want to check on your neighbors and your relatives, and a lot of the seniors especially during this holiday season. So we won't see you guys again for the remainder of the year. We won't be back until mid-January, when our first one's going to be January the 23rd. That's going to be our income taxpayer presentation about taxpayer rights and the tax credits and things like that people can apply for and take advantage of. So join us for that. When we have Houston Volunteer Lawyers that's going to be providing us with that information. So with that being said, thank you all very much. We hope you have a wonderful holiday season. We wish all of you the best. Stay safe. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your relatives. Thank you, Miss Clementina. You did a wonderful job this afternoon. We appreciate you taking the time out as well. And always, Miss Alicia and Miss Vicky, you guys don't get enough praise for answering these questions in the chat throughout the month after month after month with all of these questions. So thank y'all very much also as well. So, Miss Mabel.
Always.
Thank you.
Holidays.
Thank you.
Stay safe, everyone. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year's. Miss Mabel, always, you're part of our family, and we're very grateful to you very much. Thanks, everyone.
Happy holidays, everybody.
All right. Take care of yourselves. Stay safe, and we will see you all next time.
All right.
All right. Miss Mabel, I'll give you a call.
Okay.
Okay.